The cowboy never believed in local warnings. When the villagers told him to stay away from the sacred river, he only laughed and rode closer. The water looked clear, calm, and harmless under the burning sun. After a long ride, he knelt down and drank from it without hesitation. That was the moment everything changed. The silence around him felt different, heavier. Even the wind seemed to stop. Moments later, riders surrounded him and took him deep into tribal land where he was brought before the chief. The chief did not shout. He did not argue. He only stared at the outsider who broke the sacred rule. Then he spoke a sentence that froze the entire room. "You must marry my blind daughter." The cowboy thought it was a joke, until he saw the truth in the chief's eyes. The cowboy rode alone across wide dry land where the wind never seemed to stop. His horse moved with slow steps, tired from days of travel. There were no roads here, only faint tracks that disappeared into dust. He checked his water pouch again. Almost empty. The sun was high and harsh, pressing heat down onto the ground. Every direction looked the same. Empty land. No farms. No towns. Only distant hills fading into the sky. Then he heard water. At first he thought it was only in his mind. But the sound grew clearer as he followed it, soft and steady, coming from a narrow line of trees ahead. He slowed his horse and studied the area. The trees looked older than the rest of the land around them. Their shade was deep, almost too still. No birds moved through the branches. No animals were visible nearby. Still, the sound of flowing water pulled him forward. When he reached the edge of the trees, he saw a small stream running over smooth stones. The water was clear and cold, reflecting light between the branches. It looked like a place made for rest. But something felt different. Near the water, small markers were placed in the ground. Wooden sticks with carved signs he could not read. Bits of cloth were tied to branches above, worn and faded. The cowboy stayed on his horse and looked around carefully. No one was in sight. Only the stream and the quiet forest. He had ridden for hours without proper water. His throat felt dry. His horse lowered its head slightly, sensing the water as well. The cowboy hesitated. He remembered warnings from traders he had met weeks earlier. They spoke of lands where certain places were not to be touched. Places that belonged to others in ways outsiders did not understand. He looked back at the empty trail behind him. No one would know. The heat pressed harder, and his tired mind made the decision for him. He dismounted slowly, knelt beside the stream, and cupped the water in his hands. It was cold, clean, alive. He drank deeply. For a moment, everything felt better. The long journey, the exhaustion, the silence of the land all faded. He took another sip. Then another. When he finally stood, the forest felt different. The air was still again. And when he turned back toward the trail, he saw riders watching him from a distance between the trees. The cowboy stayed still as the riders came closer. They moved slowly through the trees, not rushing, not speaking. Their horses stepped carefully over the uneven ground until they formed a loose circle around him. There were 6 of them. The cowboy looked from one face to another, trying to understand what he had done wrong. His hand moved slightly toward his belt, but he stopped himself. There was no clear threat in their movements, only control and silence. One of the riders glanced toward the stream. Another looked at the wooden markers near the water. Then they all looked back at him. The cowboy raised one hand slightly. "I did not know," he said. "I was only thirsty." No one answered. The riders exchanged brief looks, as if his words did not matter. One of them lifted his hand and made a small signal. The circle tightened. The cowboy's horse shifted nervously beneath him. He slowly dismounted, keeping his hands visible. The riders did not react, but they also did not lower their attention. After a moment, one rider motioned forward. The cowboy understood without words that he was expected to follow. He glanced once more at the stream. The water that had seemed so harmless now felt distant and strange. Then he followed them. They led him away from the trees and deeper into the land. The silence around them grew heavier with each step. No one spoke during the ride. Even the sound of hooves seemed controlled, as if the land itself demanded quiet. As the sun began to lower, The cowboy finally saw the village ahead, and every person standing there watching his arrival. The cowboy felt every eye on him as he entered the village. People stood in small groups near the paths and open spaces, watching without speaking. Children stopped moving. Older men and women stood still, as if waiting for something they already expected. The riders who had brought him here slowed and then stopped. One of them spoke quietly to a man near the center of the village. The man stepped forward. He was older, with steady eyes and a calm face that carried authority without effort. The cowboy understood at once that this was the chief. The chief looked at him for a long time without saying anything. Not anger, not surprise, just quiet observation. The cowboy lowered his gaze slightly. "I did not know the rules of your land," he said carefully. "I did not mean disrespect." The chief listened without reaction. Around them, the village remained silent. Finally, the chief turned and spoke a few words to the riders. They stepped back, leaving only the cowboy and the chief facing each other. The chief gestured toward the direction of the stream. Then he spoke. "You drank from what is not yours." The cowboy nodded once. "Yes." The chief studied him again. The silence stretched between them. The cowboy felt the weight of the moment. This was not a place where explanations mattered more than actions. After a long pause, the chief said, "You cannot leave as if nothing happened." The cowboy tightened his jaw slightly. "I can make amends. I can work. I can pay." The chief shook his head slowly. "That is not how balance is restored here." The cowboy frowned, unsure what he meant. Then the chief spoke again, his voice steady and final. "You will marry my blind daughter." The words hit harder than anything the cowboy expected. For a moment, he thought he misunderstood. He looked around at the villagers, but no one reacted. No laughter. No shock. Only acceptance. The cowboy stepped forward slightly. "I have not even met her." The chief did not move. "This is the consequence of your action." The cowboy felt frustration rising. Marriage is not something you use like a punishment. The chief met his eyes directly. "It is not punishment. It is responsibility." The village remained silent around them. The cowboy realized then that this was not a request. It was a decision already made. The next morning, the cowboy was taken to the edge of the village where a small home stood near a line of trees. The air here was quieter than the center of the settlement, as if even sound moved more slowly. A woman sat outside the house weaving cloth between her fingers. Her movements were steady and careful, guided only by touch. She did not look up when the cowboy arrived. The guards who brought him left without a word. The cowboy stood a few steps away, unsure how to begin. After a moment, the woman spoke without turning her head. "You are the one from the stream." The cowboy hesitated. "Yes." She nodded slightly. "I thought you might come." He studied her carefully. She looked calm, but her eyes did not follow movement. He understood then what the chief had meant. She was blind. "I did not know it was forbidden," he said again, quieter this time. "I know," she replied. The silence between them stretched. The cowboy shifted his weight, uncomfortable with the situation. "Your father said I must marry you." She paused her weaving for a moment. Then she nodded once. "He told me." The cowboy frowned slightly. "And you agree with that?" She continued working. "I do not decide what my father decides." "That is not an answer." She finally turned her face slightly toward him, though her eyes did not focus. "Then what answer do you want?" The question caught him off guard. He looked toward the ground for a moment before speaking. "I want to know if you think this is right." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You think this is about punishment?" The cowboy did not respond. She continued, "My father does not see it that way." He stepped a little closer. "Then what is it?" She resumed weaving. "A connection," she said softly, "between what was broken and what must be understood." The cowboy looked back toward the village, then the open land beyond it. Nothing about this situation felt normal to him. But as he stood there, he realized something important. Leaving would not be simple anymore. Days passed in silence that slowly turned into routine. The cowboy stayed near the edge of the village, moving between small tasks and long hours of thought. No one treated him like a guest, but no one treated him like an enemy either. He often found himself near the blind woman's home. She spoke little, but when she did, her words were clear and direct. She taught him how the land sounded at night, how wind changed before storms, and how people in the village understood things without needing to see them. One evening, the cowboy returned to the stream. The water still flowed the same way, but he no longer saw it as just water. The chief stood nearby, watching him. "You understand now," the chief said. The cowboy nodded slowly. "I understand. I did not think before I acted." The chief studied him for a moment. Then he turned away, leaving the cowboy standing between the water and the village, knowing his life would not continue the same way it had before. If this story made you think about choices, consequences, and second chances, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more powerful emotional stories like this one. Comment below and tell us what you